Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu
वालेकुम सलाम मैम।
आवाज आ रही है सबको?
यस मैम।
कैसे हो आप सब लोग? कुछ पढ़ा किसी ने?
यस मैम।
Did anybody give it a reading?
यस मैम।
कुछ समझ आया?
यस मैम आ गया।
We've got 26 participants and just one is answering me कि हाँ जी मुझे कुछ समझ आ गया। बाकी rest किसी को कुछ समझ नहीं आया या आया या पढ़ा ही नहीं घर जाके? फिजा आप बताओ, did you give it a reading? फिजा ज़ैनब आप बताइए,
यस मैम।
आपने कुछ पढ़ा था इसमें जाके? Did you give it a reading?
No ma'am, but like I listened in class and it was clear. समझ आ गई थी।
Any questions from yesterday's lecture?
No ma'am.
Anybody? Anybody has any query from since yesterday's lecture? Nothing. So should we continue with the lecture?
Yes ma'am.
We don't have any queries. G. No questions? Okay, let's then move on. And today we are going to start with the other inhibitors or the other antibiotics and the mechanism of action. So yesterday we studied the two groups of antibiotics. Number one was the inhibitors of cell wall synthesis, and the others were acting on the cytoplasmic membrane. So coming from the outer to the inner structures of the bacterial cell, we have talked about the antibiotics which are acting on the cell wall. We have talked about the antibiotics which are acting on the cytoplasmic membrane. And now we come to those which are going to inhibit the protein synthesis within the cytoplasm. And as all of you know, you've studied this, proteins are vital for the growth and repair of any cell, similarly for the bacteria. And these antibiotics, they're going to act at the site of protein synthesis or at the level of the ribosomes. And these are going to include the tetracyclines, aminoglycosides, and the macrolides. And the important thing about these is that because the bacterial cell has a different ribosome, it is 70S as compared to the human cells, which is 80S, we can utilize this difference to produce antibiotics which are not going to have an effect on the human cells. However, but if we give them in high doses, they can result in damage to the human cells as well, and they can result in toxicity. So this is what you already know. The DNA is replicated, and from there the RNA is going to make a copy, which is known as transcription, and then the message is translated into the proteins. So this is, you've studied this more than I know about it at this level, because this should be very fresh in your minds. Then we have this peptide synthesis, and in which the ribosome is the structure through which the messenger RNA is going, and the the codes, they are going to be read. The codes are going to be read through these transfer RNA, and then they are going to have the complementary code on the transfer RNA, and this would be the corresponding amino acid, which gets bound to the transfer RNA, and as it reads the code, it is going to synthesize, it is going to act as a signal for the attachment of the various peptide chains with each other, and when the amino acid is linked to the previous one, the transfer RNA is free to move on. So these antibiotics are going to target one or the other process which is occurring through this protein synthesis. So this is the structure, and these are the various antibiotics which are going to act on them. Number one, they are antibiotics which are going to act on the 50S portion of the ribosome, and they are going to inhibit this chloramphenicol. It's inhibiting the peptide bond formation. Then there are others which are going to get attached to the messenger RNA on the 50S side, and therefore they are going to prevent the movement of the ribosome along the messenger RNA. Consequently, the message will not be read. Then we have the group which is going to interfere with the attachment of the transfer RNA to the messenger RNA. If there is a blockage over here, the transfer RNA will not get attached, consequently it will not be read. Then there are certain which are going to act on the 30S ribosomal unit, and these include the aminoglycosides and the streptomycin. And what they are going to do, either they are going to bind to the ribosomal subunit, and therefore they will prevent the proper reading of the messenger RNA, or they are going to change the shape. Consequently, whatever is going to be the reason, the messenger RNA will not read the message properly, and the proteins will not be synthesized. So there are different groups, and we'll study them one by one. Number one are the groups that are going to act, antibiotics which are going to act on the 30S subunit. And there are two in number. Number one are the aminoglycosides, and number two are the tetracyclines. Talking about the aminoglycosides, they are bactericidal. They are effective against the gram-negative rods, and they are 4 or 5 in number, which are the most commonly utilized. And streptomycin is one of them. It is used in the treatment of multi-drug therapy of tuberculosis. When you're giving more than one drug for the treatment of tuberculosis, streptomycin is one of them. Then we have the second, which is the gentamicin, and it is given in combination with penicillin against the gram-positive cocci, which are enterococci. It is also, basically, it is for the gram-negative rods. Aminoglycosides have an amino component, and then they have a sugar component, and they are together, linked together through a glycosidic bond. Commonly utilized Excuse me, ये बच्चे बात कर रहे हैं. चलिए अब तो खत्म हो गया, एकदम कॉन्वर्सेशन बच्चों में शुरू हो गई थी आपस की. Aminoglycosides में gentamicin, streptomycin, tobramycin, and amikacin. So it gets attached to the messenger RNA at the 30S, in the 30S ribosomal unit. And once it gets attached, this causes a blockage for the further movement of the messenger RNA. And when there is a blockage, then what you have is a messenger RNA is not going to be read properly, and the protein which is going to be synthesized, that will not be correct, and therefore the protein synthesis will be halted. Aminoglycosides, they have a lot of toxicity, and the major toxic effects include the toxicity on the ears, that is water toxicity, and nephrotoxicity. So whenever we are giving these aminoglycosides, we have to maintain the dosage, and we have to maintain the time period for which they are given, because if they're given in higher dosages, or they're giving for prolonged time of time period, then they are going to have an effect on both the kidneys as well as the ears. And these are the commonest side effects which are going to be asked by you in the Viva. You need to remember that the aminoglycosides, they are going to be absorbed from the gastrointestinal tract very poorly. So we do not give them orally. We give them parenterally. And therefore, when we are giving them through injections, they are going to be directly absorbed into the circulation. And once they are absorbed into circulation, they can go to the various organs, especially the kidney and the ears, and cause damage over there. They cannot penetrate the spinal fluid very well, and therefore they have to be given intrathecally. Whenever there's a case of meningitis, which is the inflammation of the meninges, then you have to give them through the spinal cord, and they cannot be given just intravenous or intramuscular, because they will not penetrate the spinal fluid and they will not be having a good concentration in the spinal fluid. Then they are also ineffective against the anaerobes. Anaerobes are basically the organisms which are going to grow in the absence of oxygen, because for their transport into the bacterial cell, oxygen is required. So when the anaerobes are present, oxygen is going to be absent. So these drugs are not going to be effective against the anaerobes as well.
मैम
G.
मैम ये जो एमाइनोग्लाइकोसाइड्स होते हैं ये ग्राम पॉजिटिव बैक्टीरिया के अगेंस्ट भी इफेक्टिव होते हैं?
नहीं, they are basically effective against the gram-negative bacteria.
तो ये एंटेरोकोकाई जो है ये तो ग्राम पॉजिटिव होते हैं ना?
Enterococcus is a gram-positive organism. That is why we are giving them in combination with penicillin. ठीक है, penicillin is basically going to affect the cell wall, और जब उसकी cell wall destroy हो जाएगी तो फिर then the gentamicin is able to go inside, because enterococci is one organism which is resistant to a large number of antibiotics. So बाकी जब antibiotics उसके ऊपर act नहीं कर रही होती, then we give a combination of penicillin and gentamicin. उसमें होता ये कि penicillin उसकी peptidoglycan layer को destroy कर देती है, और जब वो destruction हो जाती है, then the cytoplasmic membrane is sort of naked, और उसके बाद gentamicin can then pass through the porins and go into the cell, और फिर उसकी ribosomes के ऊपर act कर सकती है. ठीक है?
Okay, ma'am.
Then we have the tetracyclines, which is the second drug that acts on the 30S subunit. These are bacteriostatic. Aminoglycosides were bactericidal. These are bacteriostatic. They are just going to cause a stop to the multiplication of the bacteria. And what they do is that they are going to inhibit the protein synthesis by blocking the place where the transfer RNA is going to get attached. So basically, they go and get attached to the messenger RNA, blocking the site where these transfer RNAs are going to come and get attached. When the transfer RNA will not be able to get attached to the site, the protein synthesis would be inhibited. They occur both naturally as well as semi-synthetically, and the drugs commonly put in this group are the doxycycline and the tetracycline. They are broad spectrum, and they will act against the gram-positive as well as the gram-negative bacteria. These are the side effects of tetracyclines, because of which their use over the years has become comparatively less as compared to the other antibiotics. They cause phototoxicity. That is, individuals who are taking tetracycline for a period of time, their skin becomes very sensitive to light, and they will develop different types of rashes on the skin. Children who are young, if they are given tetracyclines over a longer time period, and especially when the new teeth are being formed, they are going to develop the brownish discoloration. They also cause liver damage, and consequently they are contraindicated in pregnancy. Then we have the drugs which are going to act on the 50S subunit. These were the drugs which were acting on the 30S. Now we have the drugs which are going to act on the 50S subunit. And these are 3 in number. First of all is the chloramphenicol. This is going to bind to the 50S subunit, and it is going to inhibit the formation of bonds between one amino acid and the other. And when it inhibits the bond formation, there is no the peptides. The peptide bond is going to be broken in between, And therefore, the amino acid sequence, which results in the synthesis of particular protein, that would be disrupted. And therefore, the bacterial protein synthesis will be interrupted. Again, they are natural as well as synthetic. Again, they are a broad spectrum antibiotic acting against both the gram-positive and the gram-negative bacteria. They penetrate very well into the tissues, and because of these reasons, they were commonly utilized for the treatment of meningitis, typhoid fever, and a number of other infections. But they have major side effects, amongst which number 1 is anemia, and number 2 is a gray baby syndrome. Anemia occurs in 2 forms. It could be a simple anemia, which is reversible, and an aplastic anemia, which is irreversible. And then there is a gray baby syndrome, which occurs in those newborns who have a defective glucuronic acid conjugation mechanism. So there are some enzymes which are lacking in these newborns, as a result of which glucuronic acid conjugation does not take place. And this is necessary for the degradation of chloramphenicol. So if they lack this mechanism, chloramphenicol will not be degraded, and it will get accumulated within the body, causing hypotension, and then there will be cyanosis and the individual's death. So these children, they are bluish in color or gray. They have a gray skin color because of the cyanosis and the low blood pressure, and therefore they were referred to as the gray baby syndrome. Anemia occurs because of 2 reasons. First of all, when they are targeting the mitochondrial ribosomes within the hematopoietic stem cells, the number of the cells which are going to be targeted, that will increase with the delivery of the medicine. And as the dose increases, the suppression of these ribosomes within the stem cells, that is going to be increased. And when these cells get destroyed, you will have a decreased number of blood cells which are going to be producing the WBC, the stem cells which are going to be producing the WBCs and the RBCs. Basically, the chloramphenicol gets attached to the mitochondrial ribosomes in the stem cells. The stem cells are the cells which are going to be responsible for the production of the WBCs and the RBCs. When you're destroying the stem cells, the number of cells which are producing the RBCs and WBCs will be decreased, and therefore there will be anemia. However, when we discontinue the drug, the blood cell production, that is going to return to normal. But the other one is an aplastic anemia. And the reason why this is reduced is unknown. And this reaction is also not dose dependent. And it is not going to occur only at the time when the drug is being administered. Most of the time, aplastic anemia is seen after weeks or months of the administration of the drug. And at that time, the patient would not be, or the individual would not be on any drug or on any chloramphenicol. Despite that, aplastic anemia develops. And once it develops because of chloramphenicol, this is irreversible, and the individual has low levels of both RBCs and WBCs. This is the major complication of chloramphenicol. Then we have the second group, which is the macrolides. Again, they are broad spectrum and bacteriostatic. What they are going to do is they are going to attach to the 50S ribosomal subunit. They are going to attach to the messenger RNA on the 50S ribosomal site. And once they get attached, they are going to form a block for the further synthesis of the proteins. So the transfer RNA, which is at this site, it will remain over here and it will not be discharged. It will not be free to move forward and be released. So once the transfer RNA is blocked over here, then when we have the further transfer RNA coming to this site, they will also be blocked and the chain will not proceed further and protein synthesis will be halted. The drugs included in this are the erythromycin, azithromycin, and clarithromycin. Third is the clindamycin. It belongs to the group of lymphocytes. Again, it's a bacteriostatic drug. It is effective against the anaerobes. Anaerobes, both gram positive as well as the gram negative. and it binds to the 50S subunit, and it is going to block the peptide bond formation. That is the bond formation between this bond which is between the two amino acid, that is going to be blocked by the clindamycin. And the important side effect of clindamycin is pseudomembranous colitis. What is pseudomembranous colitis? Basically, when we give an individual orally clindamycin, this is going to go and cause a disruption in the normal flora of the intestines. If it is given for a prolonged time, for more than 7 to 10 days, the clindamycin is going to have an effect on the normal flora of the intestine, which is going to be destroyed. Consequently, in those individuals who have Clostridium difficile in their intestinal guts, it's a normal flora of the intestine. If it is present and the clindamycin is getting rid of all the normal flora, it gives a free space for Clostridium difficile to overgrow. But Clostridium difficile is an organism which produces toxins as well. When it starts multiplying, it is going to produce toxins. And these toxins are going to have a harmful effect on the membrane of the intestines. Because it produces destruction of the intestinal cells. These cells, they form a sort of a membrane over the intestinal cells, or the intestinal, they form an intestinal layer. It's not an actual membrane, but it gives the appearance of a membrane. Therefore, it is known as pseudomembrane. And therefore, it is this condition, which is an inflammation of the colon with a sort of a membrane on its surface. Therefore, it is referred to as pseudomembranous colitis, and it is an important side effect of clindamycin. Again, this is a very important SCQ question or a Viva question. The fourth drug is the linezolid, which is again bacteriostatic for the enterococci and staphylococci, and it is bactericidal for the pneumococci. All of these are gram-positive organisms. It is going to bind to the 23S ribosomal RNA in the 50S subunit. It's going to inhibit the protein synthesis. The exact mechanism how this drug is acting is not known. It appears to block some early step in the ribosome formation. And two of the important organisms against which this drug is effective and is utilized commonly are the number one is the vancomycin resistant enterococci. Please kindly keep down your murmurs. So number one is the vancomycin resistant enterococci, and number two are the methicillin resistant Staphylococcus aureus. So these two organisms which are resistant to a large number of antibiotics, for them linezolid becomes the last drug of choice for the treatment. Any questions from this group? Anything which you don't understand? जी बेटा.
Aminoglycosides का जो वो था site of action जो inhibit करते हैं वो kindly repeat कर दें.
Aminoglycosides जो हैं वो 30S ribosomal unit के 30S site पे messenger RNA है वो वहाँ जाके attach होते हैं. And once they start attaching to that site, there is going to be a blockage of the movement of the messenger RNA. जब वो move नहीं करेगा, तो जहाँ पे वो खड़ा रहेगा, वहीं पे the protein synthesis, the transfer RNA is going to repeatedly keep on reading that. So basically, the message is going to be misread, and the protein which is going to be synthesized is going to be incorrect. Because इसकी movement यहाँ से आगे नहीं, जहाँ ये aminoglycosides जाके attach हो जाएंगे, वहाँ पे अब messenger RNA की movement stop हो जाएगी. So if the transfer RNA comes and gets attached and then it is released, तो ये sites 50S की site पे तो they will be available and free, and transfer RNAs will keep on coming and getting attached to the site. But जो synthesis का protein synthesis का sequence था, that would be wrong, and as a result of which the proteins which are going to be synthesized, they would be wrong, and therefore the uski jo requirement hai bacteria ki wo that will not be fulfilled, and therefore the proteins which are going to be synthesized, they would be wrong for the further mechanism or the further metabolism of the bacteria. Understood?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Any other question? Then we go to the fourth group, which is the inhibitors of nucleic acid synthesis. Nucleic acid synthesis, there are two. Number one, they are going to be the inhibitors of DNA synthesis. And number two are the inhibitors of those precursors which are ultimately going to result in the formation of DNA. Those which act by inhibiting the DNA synthesis, they are going to act within the nucleus. And these group of drugs include the fluoroquinolones and the quinolones. The fluoroquinolones, they are the bactericidal drugs, and they are going to inhibit the DNA gyrase. Now, what is the activity of the DNA gyrase? It basically is going to cause the supercoiling of the bacterial DNA so that it can remain within the cell. If it is going to be opened up, then it will not be able to accommodate itself or to remain within that small bacterial cell. And as a result of which, it will start the bacterial cell, it will disrupt the bacterial cell, and the bacterial cell will burst open. So included in this group are the ciprofloxacin, levofloxacin, norfloxacin, and ofloxacin. And they are effective against a large number of organisms, which are basically targeting the lower respiratory tract infections, intestinal tract infections, urinary tract, skeletal, soft tissue. So they are a group which are effective in a number of infections. Then we have, this is the target site of the quinolones. It targets both the DNA gyrase, which is responsible for the supercoiling. And if it is going to target that, then the supercoiling is not going to take place, and you have the unraveling of the chromosome. And when it unravels, it becomes too, its capacity becomes too much as compared to the size of the bacterial cell, and it will not be accommodated. It will put a pressure on the cell wall, and it is going to burst those cell walls. It also binds to the topoisomerase N, which is going to inhibit the bacterial DNA replication. Contraindications for use of fluoroquinolones are children with less than the age of 18 years. Then we have the pregnant or lactating women. Then we have the patients who have arrhythmias because of the toxicity of this drug. Then we have another quinolone, which is nalidixic acid, and this is used for the treatment only of urinary tract infections. So there are different antibiotics which are utilized for different infections in the fluoroquinolone groups. The second group in this are the inhibitors of precursor synthesis. These basically are the antibiotics which are structurally similar to para-aminobenzoic acid, which is one of the components of folic acid. Folic acid, as you know, is essential for the nucleic acid synthesis. We can take it from our diet, but the microbes, they have to create their own folic acid. When we have competitive inhibitors of various enzymes or competitive inhibitors of folic acid or para-aminobenzoic acid, then we are able to get those competitors attached to the cycle instead of the para-aminobenzoic acid. And when we have a different component, the folic acid synthesis would be disrupted. Again, they are broad-spectrum antibiotics and include the sulfonamides and trimethoprim as an example. So this is basically the cycle in which we have the para-aminobenzoic acid and pteridine combined with each other. This is acted upon by the dihydropteroid synthetase to be converted into dihydropteroic acid, which in the presence of the dihydrofolate synthetase is converted into dihydrofolic acid. Then with the dihydrofolate reductase, it is converted into tetrahydrofolic acid, and then it goes through a large number of other precursors, and finally it is going to be converted into thymidine and purine, and these are then going to be utilized for the synthesis of DNA. So this cycle is going to be utilized for the effectiveness of these antibiotics. These antibiotics include mostly sulfamethoxazole, dapsone, and trimethoprim. And sulfamethoxazole, it is going to act on the dihydropteroid synthetase, and it is going to block this. When it blocks it, then it is going to prevent the conversion of para-aminobenzoic acid into dihydropteroic acid. The second drug is the trimethoprim, which is going to act on the dihydrofolate reductase, and it is going to prevent the conversion of dihydrofolic acid into tetrahydrofolic acid. Generally, sulfamethoxazole and trimethoprim are given in combination, and the combination has a very common generic name, that is Septron. Septron has both these entities in it, and it becomes more effective because it is going to target two different sites of the synthetic pattern, and therefore the synthetic cycle, and therefore it is going to be more effective in reducing the number of precursors of the DNA synthesis. Certain other drugs which are not put into any category but are important because they are targeting particular types of microorganisms. Amongst that, number one is the isoniazid. Isoniazid is a bactericidal drug, and this is specific for Mycobacterium tuberculosis and other mycobacteria. Isoniazid is particularly used in combination with other drugs for the treatment of patients who are suffering from tuberculosis. And alone, it is used to prevent tuberculosis in exposed persons as a chemoprophylactic drug. It penetrates the human cell walls. Mycobacterium tuberculosis is an intracellular pathogen. That is, it goes into the cells and then it starts multiplying. So the number of mycobacteria in the outside environment would be very less. And until and unless we target those mycobacteria which are present within the macrophages, we will not be able to cure the disease. So isoniazid has the capability to penetrate the human cells. Therefore, when it goes into the cells, it can affect the organisms which are present within them. Basically, it inhibits a reductase, which is required for the synthesis of the long chain fatty acids of the Mycobacterium tuberculosis. Yesterday, we were talking about the cell wall of the mycobacteria, and I told you that it is made up of long chain fatty acids, which are called mycolic acid. And the isoniazid is basically going to inhibit the synthesis of these mycolic acids. And when it inhibits the synthesis of mycolic acid, it is going to cause a disruption in the cell wall of the mycobacteria. With the destroyed cell wall, it will not be able to survive. The main side effect is the liver toxicity as well as certain neurological complications, because these drugs need to be given for at least 3 to 6 months. Then we have another drug which is a very important and a common drug utilized, that is known as metronidazole, and a common name is the flagell. This is bactericidal against the anaerobic bacteria. For example, Bacteroides fragilis, Clostridium difficile. Clostridium difficile is, if you remember, we just talked about it in context of pseudomembranous colitis and clindamycin. So if you want to destroy Clostridium difficile, we need to give metronidazole. And again, it can be utilized for treatment of various infections, certain protozoal infections like Giardia and Trichomonas, and also for bacterial vaginosis. That's a bacterial vaginal infection in females. The main mode of action in the anaerobes is basically it acts as an electron sink. It is going to take up the electrons which are required for the energy production in case of the bacteria. Secondly, when these electrons are required, the drug ring is cleaved and a toxic intermediate is formed, which is going to damage the DNA. So basically, metronidazole is taking up all the electrons which are present within the environment. And once it takes up those electrons, when secondly it is required by the cell, then it during the release of those electrons, the drug becomes opened up. And once it opens up, it forms its form is one which is going to damage the DNA. The second mode of action is that it is going to inhibit the DNA synthesis. It is going to bind to the DNA and is going to cause the breakage of these strands of DNA. And when the strands are going to be broken up, then there is going to be a misreading of the template by the DNA polymerase. अगर वो मिसरीड करेगा तो प्रॉपर डीएनए फॉर्मेशन नहीं होगी, और डीएनए फॉर्मेशन नहीं होगी तो the bacterial cell is not going to be able to survive. So one is the ability to act as to take up the electrons, and the second ability is to inhibit the DNA synthesis. A few words about chemoprophylaxis. Now, chemoprophylaxis is a term which is utilized to indicate that the antibiotics are being given as a prophylactic measure and not as a treatment. Prophylaxis, all of you know what it is? We are studying pharmacology. Any idea? Anybody?
And prophylaxis like allergies, right?
No, it's not allergy. Yes?
It is a treatment
मैम के डिजीज
given
को
to
प्रिवेंट
prevent.
करने के लिए कोई
preventive treatment.
It's a preventive treatment.
Ma'am,
Which is,
anti-allergic.
no, beta, it's not an anti-allergic. So that's the difference. Anti-allergic are totally a different group of medicine. These are antibiotics which we are talking about, and sometimes antibiotics are used as a prophylactic agent to prevent a disease from occurring. Okay, and this is basically, for example, a person is going for surgery. So we don't want the area which is going to be operated upon to be full of bacteria, or the immunocompromised patients who are already in a state of low immunity. They are at times given antibiotics to prevent a bacterial infection or a superadded infection. And then we have certain individuals who, although they have a normal immunity, but we know that they may be exposed to certain pathogens. So as a precautionary measure, they are going to be given an antibiotic to avoid the development of the bacterial infection. So basically, whenever we are afraid that an individual will develop an infection, and we require that the patient is free of any bacterial infection, in those situations, we give them as a prophylactic measure to prevent any infection from occurring afterwards. ठीक है ना? अभी तो हमने जितनी भी antibiotics हमने पढ़ी हैं, and the mechanism which we've studied, all of those antibiotics, they are acting to prevent, they are acting on the bacteria which are already causing an infection. But sometimes we give antibiotics to prevent the development of an infection, and that is known as chemoprophylaxis. Examples क्या हैं इसके? The most common example is the prevention of endocarditis in high-risk patients who are undergoing dental surgery. What we do is that we give amoxicillin before we carry out the dental surgery, because our oral flora has got a lot of bacteria in it, and one common oral flora which is present, and that is the Streptococcus. And this Streptococcus viridans, which is normally present in our mouth, if through a cut in the oral cavity when we are doing the dental surgery, it gains entry into the circulation, it can go and damage the heart valves, especially in those individuals who are at a higher risk. Now, higher risk patients, कौन से होते हैं? Number one is that individual who has a heart valve disease. Number two is a patient who has had a prosthetic heart valve. Or number three is a patient who has already had infective endocarditis. अब ये तीनों वो conditions हैं जिसके अंदर these bacteria, if they gain entry into the circulation, they will very easily go get attached to the damaged heart valve or to the damaged endocardium. Or prosthetic heart valve is a not a normal structure. It's a foreign body, and therefore these bacteria get attracted to that foreign body as well. So to avoid a risk of developing any complication in these individuals, we are giving amoxicillin before the surgery so that the oral flora can be reduced, especially the Streptococcus species can be reduced, and there is no chance of these organisms from getting the entry into the circulation. These are the various chemoprophylactic drugs which are utilized in various situations. For example, we can take the example of ciprofloxacin, which is going to prevent meningitis in high-risk patients who are exposed to Neisseria meningitidis. Then we can give penicillin, like in patients who have rheumatic fever. Rheumatic fever is again a condition in which the heart valves have been, which the heart has been damaged because of the Streptococcus species. So in those individuals, if we want to prevent a sore throat so that further damage does not occur, we can give penicillin. And similarly, you have this whole list. I'm not going to go through this. You need to remember a few examples. You don't need the whole list to be to remember, but you need to remember a few. If you get a question on chemoprophylaxis, you can quote 2 or 3 examples in your answer. A few words about probiotics. Probiotics are basically live, non-pathogenic bacteria or yeast, and they are effective in the treatment or prevention of certain immune diseases. Beneficial effect in basically probiotics, they are taken orally and they are going to be effective in the treatment of intestinal infections basically. And possible beneficial effects are why. Why do we think the probiotics have a beneficial effect? Basically, number one, we talked, if you remember, we talked about the colonization of the bacteria. You must have discussed the colonization in your host defenses and in your pathogenic mechanisms of the disease production. Basically, when the organisms, they are going to be colonizing the intestinal tract, they will exclude the pathogens from getting attached to the binding sites. I gave you the example of an area where 10 people are living, and if all the 10 homes are going to be occupied, it is very unlikely that a person from the outside is going to come and create any other problem in that area. But if a few of the houses are unoccupied, then it's likely that 2 or 3 individuals who are not good for the community, they may come, and then once they come inside, and if they're not good for the community, they can cause a havoc or they can cause problems for the community. So the antibiotics, the probiotics are acting in the same way. They are colonizing the areas in the intestine, and they are preventing the pathogens from coming and getting attached to the intestinal areas. And once they are prevented from attaching, they will be just passed out into the stool. Number 2, they also have an effect on the immune response. They are supposed to be increasing the immunity of an individual, and they also reduce the inflammatory response against the pathogen. So they have these 3 effects, as a result of which they are given to individuals who have gastrointestinal tract infections or any disease of the gastrointestinal tract, because this is going to improve the effectiveness of the treatment which is being given. Examples include the oral administration of lactobacillus. It is going to reduce the number of cases of nosocomial diarrhea in young children. Probiotics, aapne dekhe honge, they are available in the form of tablets. At times, they are available in the form of probiotic yogurt, and they're different preparations. Number 2 is the yeast, which is going to be given, and it is going to be effective in individuals who are having the antibiotic-associated diarrhea by Clostridium difficile. Despite the beneficial effects of probiotics, they have been serious complications, but generally the adverse effects are very low. They are, because it's mostly providing a boost to the immune response, or it is enhancing your normal immune mechanisms, or it's a normal phenomenon which is occurring in the intestines, but serious complications have occurred in individuals who are very immunosuppressed or who have indwelling vascular catheters. So any individual who has a vascular catheter or who is in a very depressed immune status, those individuals should not be given these probiotics. Any questions to this point? Any questions?
No, ma'am.
Okay, understood everything?
Yes.
So we'll stop here and we'll do the antimicrobial resistance again tomorrow. If you want a recap, you can just tell me. I'll just go over briefly the whole thing.
Ma'am,
जी
what is tachyphylaxis?
pardon,
Tachyphylaxis.
tachyphylaxis.
Yes.
Tachyphylaxis, I haven't heard about it, but I can definitely look into this term. और मैं आपको I can get back with the definition tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Tachyphylaxis.
Ma'am,
Google की dictionary, so it is telling me that it is a rapidly diminishing response to successive doses of a drug, rendering it less effective.
Okay.
Basic, आपको ये pharmacology वाले आपको मेरा ख्याल है कि they will give you a better idea about this. But basically, it is suggesting that when you are giving an because जो आपके central nervous system की drugs हैं, they are given over a longer period of time. These are not going to be antibiotics. They are going to be some other drugs which are for the treatment of central nervous system diseases. For example, अगर किसी को fits पड़ रहे हैं, किसी को seizures हैं, these are the drugs which are going to be given for a prolonged period of time, more than 6 months. In certain individuals, when these drugs are going to be given for such a prolonged time, the effectiveness of the drugs is going to diminish. And either you need to decrease the dose of the drug or you need to change the drug. So this is basically what they refer to as tachyphylaxis.
Okay.
Any other question?
मैम अमाइनोग्लाइकोसाइड्स का वो एक्शन एक बार प्लीज दोबारा बता दें.
अच्छा देखो, this is the ये वाला 30S का सब पोर्शन, ठीक है, ये वाला जो पोर्शन है 30S का है. अमाइनोग्लाइकोसाइड्स इस पोर्शन के साथ जाके बाइंड करेंगे. जब वो इस पोर्शन के साथ जाके बाइंड कर लेते हैं तो फिर क्या होगा, यहाँ पे जब वो बाइंड कर लेंगे तो ये जो एरिया है ये इसके अंदर कोई ना कोई किंक प्रोड्यूस कर देगा या कोई ना कोई इसकी शेप में इन्वॉल्वमेंट प्रोड्यूस कर देगा. ठीक है, शेप को चेंज कर देगा. जब वो शेप को चेंज कर देगा उसके बाद क्या होगा कि इसकी जो रीडिंग है यहाँ से इसमें इसकी रीडिंग जो है दैट विल बी डिस्टर्ब्ड. ठीक है, जब वो डिस्टर्ब हो जाएगी तो उसके बाद इसका जो सिंथेसिस प्रोटीन सिंथेसिस है दैट इज गोइंग टू बी. दिस इज वेरी इजीली एक्सप्लेन्ड विद दिस टाइप. अब ये अमाइनोग्लाइकोसाइड है. अमाइनोग्लाइकोसाइड में ये आपका मैसेंजर आरएनए व्हिच इज पासिंग थ्रू द 50 एंड द 30S सब यूनिट. ठीक है,
यस.
जब ये 30S सब यूनिट की साइड के ऊपर जाके अटैच हो जाएगा तो यहाँ पे when it is going to get attached, it will not allow this messenger RNA to move forward. यहाँ पे ब्लॉकेज हो जाएगा. ठीक है, क्लियर?
यस मैम.
अब वो क्या रहा है, बेसिकली होता ही है कि आपका ट्रांसफर आरएनए आया, उसने इसको यहाँ से रीड किया. रीड करने के बाद इट मूव्स फॉरवर्ड एंड वंस इट गिव्स द अमाइनो एसिड पेप्टाइड बॉन्ड जब बन जाएगा तो ये डिसोसिएट होके इट इज गोइंग टू बी रिलीज्ड. ठीक है, और राइबोसोम से वो बाहर निकल जाएगा. दैट इज द नॉर्मल फिनोमेनन. अगर ये मूव नहीं कर रहा तो क्या होगा? इफ इट इज नॉट,
एलिमिनेशन नहीं होगी.
एलिमिनेशन तो होती रहेगी. दिस इज यहाँ पे आएगा बिकॉज इट्स नॉट ब्लॉकिंग दिस एरिया. वो ये वाला एरिया ब्लॉक कर रहा है, इसकी मूवमेंट को ब्लॉक कर रहा है. जब इसकी मूवमेंट ब्लॉक हो जाएगी इट विल रिमेन स्टैटिक, इट विल रिमेन स्टेशनरी. तो होगा क्या कि ये जो रीडिंग एरिया है, रीडिंग फ्रेम है, दैट विल रिमेन द सेम. ये चेंज नहीं होगा. तो ट्रांसफर आरएनए आएगा, आके ये प्रोटीन्स और अमाइनो एसिड वही वाली इसको अटैच करता जाएगा जो कि पहले अटैच हो चुकी. क्लियर? ये समझ आई बेटा बात कि नहीं समझ आई अभी? देखो, ये जो ट्रांसफर आरएनए ये एक लाइजीन को कोड कर रहा है और ये एस्परजीन को कोड कर रहा है और ये ट्रिप्टोफैन को कोड कर रहा है. जब ये बॉन्ड दोनों में बन जाता है तो फिर आपकी ये जो चीज है ये इससे डिसोसिएट हो जाती है, और ये फर्दर जब मूव करता है तो ये राइबोसोम से बाहर निकल के एम्प्टी होके अगेन इट इज रेडी टू गेट अनदर अमाइनो एसिड. दिस प्रोसेस इज गोइंग टू कंटिन्यू, और जब इसकी मैसेंजर आरएनए की सारी रीडिंग खत्म हो जाती है तो पर्टिकुलर प्रोटीन या पॉलीपेप्टाइड चेन जो है वो बन के खत्म हो जाती है. ठीक है, ऐसे ही होता है ना?
Yes, ma'am.
ये तो आपका रूटीन बट अगर आपका मैसेंजर आरएनए आप किसी चीज को स्टैटिक कर देते हो, स्टेशनरी कर देते हो, इट इज नॉट मूविंग, इसका मतलब ये कि इसका ये वाला रीजन तो नहीं पढ़ा जा रहा, it is not moving towards over here and it is not going to be read. When this is not going to be read, तो ये वाले अमाइनो एसिड्स इस चेन में इनकॉर्पोरेट नहीं होंगे. जो इनकॉर्पोरेट होंगे वो यही दो होंगे जो बार बार इनकॉर्पोरेट होंगे. कि ये एम्प्टी होगी स्पेस, यही वाला जो है कोड दोबारा यहाँ पे आके लग जाएगा, दोबारा लाइसिन आके लग जाएगा. ये एम्प्टी होगी स्पेस, एस्पर्जिन आके दोबारा लग जाएगा. सो जो आपकी ये चेन बढ़ेगी, that would be with repeated units of lysine and aspergine because it is unable to move and the transfer RNA is not reading anything new. जो ये आपकी फिर polypeptide chain है, that will not be normal. That will not be the protein, the polypeptide chain which is required for protein synthesis. जब वो protein synthesis normal नहीं होगी, तो फिर cell की synthesis में उसका कोई role नहीं होगा, तो cell is going to then suffer और वो उसके बाद उसकी destruction हो जाएगी.
Okay, ma'am.
समझ आइए बेटा?
जी मैम.
Any other question? So we have got 5 groups of antibiotics. Let's go back to the just for a brief recap. So basically you need to remember this diagram which will help you to remember the mode of action of the various antibiotics on the bacterial cell wall. So we have 5 groups. Number 1 is the inhibitors of cell wall synthesis, which included the penicillins, the cephalosporins, and the vancomycins. And they are basically going to be more effective against the gram-positive bacteria because of the thicker peptidoglycan layer as compared to the gram-negative bacteria. Then we have second group, which is going to act on the cytoplasmic membrane. And basically, these drugs, because they are acting on the cytoplasmic membrane, they are not going to be very effective in the sense that they are going to also act on the cytoplasmic membrane of the human cells. So these drugs are given not orally or parenterally, but rather they are utilized as a topical application on the intact skin. Then third are the groups which are going to inhibit the translation and the transcription of the bacteria and the translation and transcription processes, and these include the tetracyclines, the erythromycin, streptomycin, and the chloramphenicol. And then we have the inhibitors of the DNA replication or DNA synthesis, which are the quinolones. And finally, we have the inhibitors of the metabolism or the precursors of the DNA synthesis. So these are the few groups which are acting as the on the bacterial anatomy, and they are the main mechanisms of antibiotic action. Any questions? Okay, thank you. Tomorrow we are going to then start with the topic of antibiotic resistance, how the bacteria, they are going to develop resistance against these groups of antibiotics, what are the mechanisms, and whether they are all related to genetics or whether they are related to certain activities which we are doing normally in our environment, as a result of which antibiotic resistance is developing. Thank you so much.